Awesome. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. So
Thanks for having us.
before we get started, we've got a little message from the flight deck, and then we'll take flight with our presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard our special presentation, Take Flight with Your Copilot Community. Fasten your seatbelts as we prepare to embark on a knowledge-rich journey with our esteemed presenters, Andy Huneycutt and John Moore. As we taxi onto the runway, let me introduce you to Andy Huneycutt, our captain in the realm of Microsoft 365 Enterprise Collaboration. Andy is not only the president of Upskill Tech, Inc., but also a seasoned pilot with 15 years of experience navigating the skies of Microsoft collaboration technologies. His expertise has been instrumental in leading Microsoft 365 training and user adoption services for a major healthcare organization. Recognized for his contributions since 2017, Andy has been honored as a Microsoft MVP for Microsoft apps and services. Sitting in the co-pilot seat, we have John Moore, an enterprise architect with a mastery of the Microsoft 365 platform. With over 15 years of experience, John has been delivering technology services that elevate user experience and empower individuals to work effectively from any location, on any device. His enthusiasm for sharing new technology and transforming workplace habits is unparalleled. Like Andy, John is also a decorated Microsoft MVP in M365 apps and services. Prepare for takeoff as we cruise through insights and innovations with Andy and John guiding us. Thank you for choosing to fly with us today. Enjoy the presentation.
All right.
So with that, we want to welcome everybody to Flight 365 with Service Teams Nation. He's John, I'm Andy, and today we are going to be talking about our journey with Copilot. So this is cleared for takeoff. Take flight with your Copilot community. And what you can expect for our flight and our journey today is we're going to briefly cover in the pre-flight what Copilot is. There are tons of other sessions about Copilot. It's been the hottest thing in the Microsoft world, I think, going back for almost a year and a half now. So we're not going to go really deep into what Copilot is. We want to talk about the journey that you are going to be undertaking as you begin implementing Copilot into your organization. So we'll start off with Taxi. We're going to talk about some of the key elements that you need to understand from a strategy standpoint. We're concentrating on engagement, planning, and setting objectives so that we don't just roll Copilot out and expect magic to happen, but we set our teammates up for success to be able to take advantage of this superpower that we now have at our disposal. We're going to be going through the takeoff, things that you need to consider when you're doing a community-based deployment of this technology. Inside of there, we're going to talk about things you need to do to foster a collaborative environment. That's also going to help you to learn how to identify the power users, champions, and to get buy-in from your audience to get more out of your Copilot experience. We are going to talk about turbulence. You're not going to get it right the first time. This is going to be an iterative, kind of a back and forth conversation, much like interacting with Copilot. We'll talk about some of the challenges that we faced, and hopefully it'll help you to maybe dodge some of those hurdles while you're working with this in your environments. We're going to talk about some of the adoption barriers, as well as what you can do to leverage those champions to get over some of the turbulence that you're going to face. Once we hit our cruising altitude, we are going to talk about some of the best practices that we've learned through the EAP program that we ran in our respective organizations, but also the things that we've learned from the community and put into practice. We'll talk about how you can evaluate your progress, some techniques that you can apply, how you can work with training and support systems, and also continuous improvement through feedback loops. And then finally, as we make our descent and come in for our at our final destination, we're going to talk about a call to action and some additional resources that you can take advantage of to get the most out of your Copilot journey. So with that, let's dive right in to the pre-flight preparations. So the first thing we want to briefly touch base on is what is Copilot. So again, we've already talked about Copilot has been the biggest thing in the Microsoft industry now for about a year and a half, and there's Copilot content everywhere. We want to concentrate really on what Copilot is from an end user perspective, what they can do with it. So we've got the Copilot and the experience pillars. Some of the things that we can do with Copilot today are things like generating new content, helping me to ideate, to research content, to take a simple search and expand that into something way more powerful, a back and forth conversation. I can have a dialogue with it. That can help me to generate new content, whether it's summarizing something that I already have, turning that into an outline, classifying text, whether that's answering questions that I have against that content or helping me to think about new questions related to that content. But I can also do some really powerful things with Copilot, like generating images. I can work with code generation, comments in code, understanding code, refactoring code. I can use it for language translation as well. And the most powerful experience that we get from Copilot is Copilot itself as a virtual assistant. This is the closest thing that I've seen to Iron Man's Jarvis as a virtual assistant tool. I can work with Copilot and I can interact with Microsoft 365 endpoints all across the ecosystem. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John and let's talk a little bit more about the experience pillars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you break down all of these capabilities into, groups or what you can do and how you want to drive your adoption, you've really got what you can do in the apps themselves. And then you've got the cross app experience, which is, as Andy mentioned, that Copilot chat or that virtual assistant. So in the applications, that's your Copilot button where you're summarizing a document, you're creating slides, you're doing what is capable within the confines of that application. When we're talking about Copilot as a open-ended virtual assistant, that cross-app experience is found in the Copilot chat. That's either in Microsoft Teams in the application called Copilot or copilot.microsoft.com or office.com/chat. And the power of this cross-app experience is that when you're chatting and you're having ongoing conversations with your virtual assistant, you're getting information from across the Microsoft suite and what we call the graph. So all of these interconnected pieces of data about your work life, who you work with, what presentations you're sharing together, what you have to do tomorrow in your meeting calendar, things like that. They all come together to give you that well-rounded response in that chat that you can keep going on with from those different applications. So as we've oriented what Copilot is and what it does, why would we care about having a community for Copilot? And there's four main pillars or reasons why we think community is important, especially for brand new transformative technology like this. If you invest in your community and you spend the effort to really build it up and provide a place that brings value to your users, eventually it will become self-sustaining, where you'll be able to, have the community help each other, right? And then you're just kind of facilitating, you're guiding where the product is going, but everybody is, supporting each other in the process. You'll find that your early adopters or your champions will kind of bubble up, and you'll have these same people who are going through and they're, answering questions, they're providing helpful tips and tricks, things like that. And you can wrap your arms around those people and have them help you, in a two-way relationship where you give them a little bit more insight, you help them be more prepared and get those early things that they crave so much in exchange for them helping you carry that community, and they bring value to that community, especially when we get into those turbulent times that we'll talk about. And then whenever you have a community, you have a centralized place where you get to share what's new and next, and you get to kind of set a baseline for how people should use this technology, what the best practices are, things like that. And when we talk about generative AI, there's a lot of risk concerns and a lot of, worry about fear, uncertainty, and doubt of, is this too powerful? Am I going to run into data that I shouldn't have access to? Things like that. You can kind of proactively combat those fears, but you can also set a baseline for how people should use AI responsibly and set a good example for, here's how we're doing it in our organization. Here's how our champions are using Copilot. And they can basically set some of those best standards, like you should validate everything before you just use it in a client deliverable. You should always check your sources, things like that. You can instill those values in a central community rather than, having all these little pockets of people doing things differently. And then finally, you can learn a lot from your community. It's not just about you dumping information into the community. You'll find that as it becomes that self-sustaining system, you'll learn things that improve the business overall. So you'll understand new things that could help the business meet their key objectives, things that are innovative, maybe new pathways for your business to break into new areas or new product categories, things like that. You can learn those things from your community, and where you become a really mature community manager and really, kind of architect in your IT world is connecting those opportunities with what you know and understand about the business to really, actually achieve that transformation that we're hoping for whenever we purchase our Copilot licenses, and we just want to get usage right out of the gate. So Andy, take us through some of like the blueprints or structure of what we would get out of, building a community, and how do we plan for this thing?
Absolutely. So as we taxi down the runway, there's some successful elements that we've identified that can help you with your community strategy. At a high level, we got 3 major points. There's your community blueprint. We're going to dive into this in the next slide or so, but this is where we define the objectives. This is where we identify the stakeholders, where we get buy-in from our decision makers. We also start to establish roles within the community. And it takes a community to really deploy and understand this, because you are going to be working with the business and their business processes to implement this. From there, we're going to go into the communication plan. This is important because it also establishes not only communication from the sponsors of the deployment, but it also provides a feedback loop or a feedback mechanism so that you can start to measure the impact in your organization. So you can start to grow your community by taking lessons learned, success stories, and forwarding those on to other groups to help them quickly get started, to save time and to get up to speed. And then we're going to touch base on the end game. Whether you develop your own center of excellence, whether you utilize Microsoft Center of Excellence, but having a central port, a destination for your community to be able to gather, find the information that they need quick and easy. So with that, let's start off with the community blueprint. So the first thing we need to understand when it comes to developing the community is, number one, who's going to own and maintain this? We do recommend that you make this a group effort. Your adoption team, your Microsoft 365 admins, IT pros, power users, but you are going to need some buy-in from your senior leadership, your project sponsor and executive, and you're going to need IT involved in this, because there's going to be different levels within the community. There's going to be general community interaction. There's going to be technical troubleshooting. There's going to be admin responsibilities for rolling out Office updates, for licensing, and then technical issues related to that. So there's going to be a mix inside of there, but you need to have an ownership over the entire community. And typically, the ownership need to be people that can devote time to fostering the community, because the community is essentially like a garden. You're going to be gathering information. You're going to be feeding that community, answering questions. You're going to be directing people toward resources. You're going to be leading training sessions. You're going to be leading the adoption initiative. So you're going to need people that are going to be actively engaged. It cannot be passive here. You need to be actively engaged with this. So with that comes the next question: a new or existing community. In my situation, we decided to roll with a brand new community. We typically use tools like Viva Engage for Microsoft 365 user adoption and training. In this particular case, this is a special project for a subset of the larger organization. So we needed to create a new community so that we can kind of put some walls around it and focus the conversation on Microsoft Copilot. What you name it probably needs to have Copilot in the name somehow, just so people can quickly identify and get back to it. But then you're going to have the other question of where do you create this community? Do you create it in Microsoft Teams? Do you create it in Viva Engage? Is it a standalone SharePoint site? Where are your community members going to meet? And the size of your community is really going to determine where that's going to be. There are some limits around that. We'll talk about that coming up in a bit. But you also need to define the scope. And the scope is going to be, does this apply to strictly Copilot, or is it Copilot and application in Microsoft 365? Is it Copilot and other generative AI tools, other Copilots that we might be rolling out in the organization? You have to pick the scope, and remember, depending on how broad your scope is, there's going to be a broad spectrum of users across the organization with different experience levels. And if you have a whole lot of base entry level questions, you're going to turn off some of those people that are maybe more technically proficient, and they might go and establish their own pocket, their own silo, and we don't necessarily want that. So we kind of have to find that balance inside of there. But as part of establishing the community, you really need to define and advertise the objectives of the community. Why are we creating this? What's our end goal? What's in it for me as an end user? So we want users to tune into the radio station WIIFM. What's in it for me? You need to express the value of the community. This is your place to answer questions, to get help, to troubleshoot, to engage with other people, and to grow your skills, which can help grow your career. So define the objectives. Who's going to be the intended audience? Are you going to open this up for only people that are participating in your Copilot program? Are you going to make this more broadly and open it up for a general audience, people that might not be Copilot licensed, and share what you're learning with them in anticipation of perhaps growing that program down the road? And then what kind of content is going to resonate with those crowds? You're going to have a whole bunch of delivery mechanisms. We'll talk about that in the next couple of slides that you need to consider whenever you're starting to roll out your community. So with that, I'm going to hand it back off to John, and we'll go into defining the objectives.
Yeah, so whenever we double click on the objectives, I want to give you a couple of examples to maybe inspire you, as well as think about the style of communication that you're looking for, or the style of community. There's 3 basic types of communities that you can build out there when you're talking about supporting a product like Copilot. Is it many to one? Are you having the masses come to you for help, and you're basically providing support? In that type of a community, you might look at like doing a Viva Engage community. You might look at setting like the post type to a question by default, because the intent is to provide support, right? Are you doing a one-to-many type of layout where, we're not really expecting people to, provide that innovation or that, lessons learned that they're getting from the core. We're going to use it as a mechanism to communicate, and we're going to use like a megaphone to blast information. Or are we going to build a community where people help each other, and we take a very light-handed approach as far as, setting the standards and, and deciding like what is official communication versus like, organic communication. And I think what you'll find is that in the life of a community, you're going to go through waves and phases where you're going to shift in and out of these different gears from time to time. If you have a very successful, long living community, you're probably going to start out with providing support for people, because when people jump in, the first thing they're going to want to know is like, where are the buttons at? How do I get it? It's grayed out for me. They're going to have stumbles along the way to get going. And then once they get running, and they're past the basics, they're going to need that support under them with proactive information. And that's when you kind of transition into an info blast type of community where I need to feed these people. I need to give them content regularly so that it's not like, we turned it on for you, go figure it out, right? You want to keep them going. And a lot of times that's going to be you giving information out. And then eventually, as you mature, hopefully you'll graduate to that grassroots thing where you're watching like the dividends of all of your work pay off with innovation and people helping each other and people hopefully making connections across the organization to do things that they wouldn't have done previously had they still been in the silos where they didn't even know each other existed. Now, some of the objectives that I've seen whenever I've created communities off the bat are, is my goal to just drive numbers and get usage? Is it to avoid support tickets and build like a knowledge base so that, people can get their question answered without calling the help desk every time? Is it to save money by not using another alternative solution that you might be paying money for on the other side? Think through like what your goals are for community, and that will hopefully help you, kind of preload your community with valuable information to actually achieve those goals and measure toward them. Now, when you're designing your community, a good thing to do is to sit down with an actual like spreadsheet or table and say, who are going to play the different parts in my community? These communities, a lot of times, that it would be a unicorn if you just launched it and it just everybody fell into place and did their job and everything worked out great. You want to go recruit people to play these specific roles, right? You definitely need an executive or a business sponsor who's going to apply. Why are we doing this? What's the point? How does it help the business and support the business? You need community managers to keep everybody on track, keep them going the right direction, set standards. You need to understand how this applies to the business and hopefully how it's transforming processes and workflows for people beyond just the, oh, great, I made a slide deck. Oh, great, I summarized my emails. If you put together several of those foundational use cases, you can transform a whole process. Well, you need people who understand those processes so that they can tell you, like the direction that we're going and if we're actually getting that transformation. Your legal risk infosec partners, a lot of times you can have a very contentious relationship with these people. I know firsthand that it can be very hard if you're working in spite of these groups. I would recommend that from experience, bring them in early and have them be an active part of the community so that not only can they see the risks and the mitigations that you put into place, like actually working and functioning correctly, but they can see the impact of their decisions and the impact of those policies on the business in either a good or bad way, right? And it can help inform policy down the road if they're part of that community as well. I mentioned earlier, of course, you're going to find people that kind of bubble up to the top and become champions. You want to set those people aside so that you give them something a little bit extra in return for them helping you a little bit extra in your community. And we'll talk about enlisting your champions to get you through turbulence here at the end. And then, of course, you can't do anything with your community if you don't have end users to actually, do the talking. So let's kick it back over to Andy to talk about what are we going to fill in our community once we get it built.
Thanks, John. So one of the things that I think is most critical with establishing the community is the communication plan. This needs to be core to some of the strategy you're developing, and it's going to help to establish the expectations for people that are participating in the community. We want to streamline the communications as much as we can and have one path for communication so that people pay in and pay attention to that and tune in to that along the way. So with that in mind, the communication plan, and we've got kind of a roadmap for this coming up in just a bit, but with the communication plan, the welcome and onboarding is really critical. You only get one chance for a first impression. And as people are getting involved in the community, they're really enthusiastic. They're really excited about this new technology. They probably volunteered for the project, or they were voluntold for the project, but they have an interest in Copilot and generative AI. And we want to use that enthusiasm to our advantage. So when we send out this welcome and this onboarding message, not only are we telling them you're getting Copilot, you're going to be on the cutting edge of technology, you've got this new amazing tool that can save you time and effort in your day-to-day job, and it can do some really powerful things. But we're also establishing where to find help and resources. We're giving them a link to the center of our community, and that's going to be really important for them to go back and engage with other people later on. So we want to make sure that we get the onboarding right, the communication, and we want to be measured with this. We don't want to onboard 5 people here and then 15 people there. We want to try to batch it together as much as we can and then establish that initial onboarding message to them. From there, we're going to go into onboarding communication or ongoing communication. We need to have a specific communication method that we use, whether we're posting news announcements and updates in Teams, whether we're supplementing that with email-based communications. We want to establish how we're going to communicate with our users, make sure they're clear on that so they pay attention to those communications whenever they're coming in. News announcements and updates are critical for the growth and ongoing part of your community. Onboarding, you've got the excitement of the users. Then you've got your onboarding meetings where they're kind of asking questions, they're understanding how this content works. But the thing to keep in mind about this program, this initiative, Copilot as a whole, is this plane that we're on is still being built while we're in the air trying to roll it out in our organization. It's still being built by Microsoft and new capabilities are coming. So we need to be able to announce the what's new, what's changed. We need to be able to publish updates to Copilot, and having that ongoing communication plan is going to be one of the ways to do that. So recommend centering your news announcements and updates and rolling that into your ongoing communications to amplify that message as much as you can. And then we can get into establishing a center resource for users to ask those questions for their troubleshooting and the technical issues that they share. But it's not just about that. It's also about sharing success stories, sharing use cases where a light bulb goes off for somebody else and they're like, why didn't I think of that? Let me do that in my business processes now. And they can start to save time in their day-to-day activities and the day-to-day roles. So establish the communication plan at the beginning and be consistent. And that's the hardest part. Be consistent and keep that consistency. Back to you, John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So whenever we're talking about filling our community with content and feeding that community, I like to think about a well-rounded menu. And this fits nicely into the airline theme, but this comes from a few years ago, right? Where you want to have a little bit of something for everyone. And you're going to find that some people, they're so busy that they really just need to get the base information and move on with their day. Some people, they're going to want to spend time and get hands-on, and they're going to dedicate hours to you. You know, they would take classes and things like that. So it's good to have a healthy mix of these things. And I like to think of them in terms of snacks, meals, and feasts. So whenever I'm sitting down to create content, am I creating a class? That would be more of a feast, right? So we've got more than an hour potentially. Am I going to get people for 2 hours, 4 hours? You know, I would build my content around that. Maybe we're going to do hands-on labs, things like that. Am I hoping to get people to read something over like their lunch break or in transition between meetings, something like that? Maybe I've got them for a meal. Those would be things like how-to guides or job aids, or maybe they want to read an inspiring success story about how someone took a use case for Copilot and it helped them through a process, and they talk through, you know, what their challenges were and how they overcame their challenges with the help of the technology, things like that. Those are like your 15 to 60 minute type of meals. And then you've got the people who are like back-to-back meetings. Maybe they've got like 2 minutes to watch a tip video or something like that. Those are the things you can get out rapidly, right? Those are your snacks. So you can do less than 5-minute tip videos, things that are like TikTok style, a lot of announcements where you're kind of pushing information out to somebody's mailbox. You want it to be kind of like bullet point format, like here's exactly what you need to know and nothing more. Those are like touch points and kind of snacks throughout. So I would personally recommend that you would design an editorial calendar There's a Microsoft List template for this, actually, that you could deploy a communication plan with a calendar and everything. You could also use Microsoft Planner as an editorial calendar, but I would get your content creators together, and then I would label these things as, are they a snack, a meal, or a feast, and who's going to work on what the purpose is, so that you can assign a value to it, so that you know that you're working on things that actually are going to resonate with your audience, and you're not just throwing things out there hoping that it will work. So a special plug for how we can reuse content. Andy, you're a huge fan of SharePoint News. Tell us why you think that would be, some of the best technology you could use for this.
Absolutely. So we're talking about establishing a community and building it on top of Microsoft apps and services. SharePoint News is already part of those apps and services that we're working with. If you're establishing your community in Microsoft Teams, there's a SharePoint site that's backing it up. If you're establishing a community in Viva Engage, the SharePoint site that's going to be backing it up. And the SharePoint News service, and I'm emphasizing service because that's what it is already built into those sites. When you publish content using SharePoint News, you're basically taking a SharePoint site page, you're able to add in text, links, and rich media like audio, video, and images. You're able to dynamically filter content through the highlighted content web part, and you can create that page based off of templates that exist out of the box from Microsoft, or custom templates that you create. When the page is ready to be published, you can promote it to the news service. And when you promote it to the news service is picked up in a bunch of different endpoints. It could be on the homepage of the SharePoint site. It could extend into the Microsoft team where your community is based. It could extend to SharePoint Home. And it also goes to SharePoint Hub sites. So if you're hubified in your environment, the hub can pick up that news. It works across the web and to your mobile devices. So establishing it as SharePoint News allows you to amplify that message. Additionally, some new features that we've gotten recently from Microsoft is the ability to send customized branded email notifications based off of the page that you just created. So you only have to do the work one time. Then you can go ahead and send that as an email. It's going to be beautifully formatted, and you can reach users through their inbox as well as the other applications that you might already be using. And if you want, you can even establish that inside of Microsoft Teams, taking advantage of kind of the portal effect with Viva and Teams, and you can turn that into the center hub for the news related to your Copilot community. That being said, within an organization, you actually have the ability to set up multiple news feeds. You can establish a site as a news feed, so you could have one specifically catered for your audience that's involved in that SharePoint deployment. And as that deployment matures, it could carry over from there. Now, moving forward, got a few more things to discuss as we are taking off and developing the community. So we mentioned a little while ago that you want to establish a center location for your audience to engage, whether that's the news announcements and updates that you're publishing, the questions, answers, and content that we have our are you going to do Teams or are you going to do Viva Engage? And we kind of recommend these two because of the collaborative nature of both. You could do a standalone SharePoint site, but you're going to limit some of the collaboration there. Whereas when you work with Teams and Viva Engage, you have the ability to engage in conversation. So you can, in Teams, create a team, use the channels, and then organize conversations maybe inside of the team based off of the Copilot experience. For example, you might have a channel that's specifically for Copilot in Excel, and you just answer and discuss Excel-based questions there related to Copilot. Now, one of the limitations that you might run into when you're working with teams is it's limited to 25,000 people per team. That's the hard cap on that. If you're doing a pilot program, you might be dealing with 300, 600, 1,000 people. That's a good starting point. But if you start to roll this out across a large enterprise, you're going to reach the limited teams pretty quickly. So that's where Viva Engage actually is really helpful. Viva Engage can actually span a much larger audience if need be. You still have that discussion board. You still have the question and answer feature. In fact, Viva Engage also allows you to mark best answers and best replies. So you have an authoritative answer to a conversation that's actually happening. And in both situations, Teams and Viva Engage, you're going to be able to take advantage of things like town halls and webinars and rich media. You can bring that in to your Teams channels. Maybe you have a meeting channel where you establish your check-ins there. Viva Engage, you can have those town halls published or those webinars inside of there, and people can interact from that. So you're going to get a lot of that meeting capability built in both locations. And both of these are going to share that they have SharePoint already built in for managing files and content, meeting recordings, for instance, for your Copilot community. And in addition, you can create SharePoint lists, Microsoft lists if you need to for maybe tracking purposes related to user cases and metrics. And then you're also going to be able to do things in both locations, such as pinning and making announcements. They're both going to support news announcements and updates, but within Teams and within Viva Engage, you're going to be able to pin those important things to the top, and you're going to be able to cycle and roll through those. Now, one of the things that I really like about Teams that I just want to briefly mention, we have repurposed the general channel. Only moderators can post and reply there. So anything that goes out in that channel is something that we want to make sure that people are paying attention to. We'll make an announcement. We'll make it important. But we limit the feedback from users inside of there so that we don't have a flood of responses and maybe the message goes off topic. But pick and choose your own adventure. And one other thing to say about that is you might start off in Teams, and then maybe Copilot really catches on in your organization. You might need to have a path to switch over to phase 2 and maybe go to Viva Engage.
Mm-hmm. So real world talk, Andy, where is your organization at right now? Are they Teams or Viva?
We are Teams across a couple of tenants.
Okay. Teams across a couple of tenants. How many people do you guys have in your community right now?
We've got 600 across two separate communities.
Okay, cool. So in my organization, EY, we've got over 400,000 people total. We started out in Microsoft Teams with about 80-ish people. That was our phase 1 to do risk analysis. Exiting out of that and moving into use case analysis of business value, that was where we made the decision in my organization to go from Teams to Viva Engage. We're one of those organizations that is easily going to go over 25,000 people really quickly. So we decided to kind of take that transitional pain or moving process early on. And we're living in Viva Engage right now with about 900 users in our community. So I wanted to kind of make that a little bit real, about what are we actually doing? And we've both started in Teams, and I think we're probably going to move toward the Viva Engage side. So practical onboarding, actual hands-on, getting people in to their Copilot license. This is a helpful graphic for any type of onboarding and talking about splitting your group up into basically boarding groups. This is something we used in a previous project. It kind of applies here, which is very meta of us, but you want to bring people on early that are your early adopters where you can learn things from. You can kind of understand, the capabilities and the risks, things like that of your Copilot. Then you want to bring on your business class people and get them licensed. That way you can provide a little bit of white glove service, right? And you're growing in a structured way where you can help them get to their seat properly. You can, make sure that they're good to go before you go to coach. By the time you go to coach and you're doing thousands of people with Copilot, hopefully you take your lessons learned from the first onboarding groups, you operationalize it, you talk about automating things, and that way you can get people on quickly and know that they're going to have a consistent experience. With that being said, this is the typical journey for enabling people in any type of new technology. Maybe you let them know that they're going to get the technology. With Copilot especially, you might have some special terms that they need to understand. Maybe they need to agree to a new policy or something like that. You give them their license, you put them in the community, and then you got to train them, right? You get them onboarded, you get them up to speed, and they're off and running. That's okay for like your first waves of people, like those first couple boarding groups. What you want to do though is you want to wrap that in automation. And what we've done at our organization is we have automated those middle steps right here. So what we're doing at EY is when people are nominated, when people, get told they're getting a license, they do read and agree to some usage guidance that we have for them. Then that kicks off a process powered by a Power Automate flow with a Microsoft form that kicks off giving them their license because it puts them in a group. It adds them to an intra ID group to put them in the community. They get a customized email directed at them with here's our FAQs, here's what you need to get started, and also here's our classes. Go sign up for a class. Then at that point, it's on the user to sign up for the class and get themselves going. And this has taken a lot of the manual labor out of things. Andy, I think you've been doing something somewhat similar at Atrium, right?
So our process aligned very, very closely with what you've done here, and we did not talk about this portion of our journey until after we had been in the EAP for a few months and kind of doing our own things. And it was really interesting how it lined up, and our experiences were actually very parallel. We had an open call for users to volunteer for the program. And then from there, we had a lot of automation set up where through Microsoft Forms, we gauge interest in it. We were able to check licensing. We were able to create our initial list of participants, why they think that participation in the program will be valuable for them. They agreed to our expectations to participate in the program. And then we were able to use Microsoft lists to track all of those users, track the assignment process for the licensing, and really utilize Power Automate to automate a lot of that. It also gives us a ongoing list of who's actively in the community. And then from there, it gives us a way to establish communication beyond just the community for those users. So kind of continuing off of that, one of our requirements as part of that process was we're not just going to give you the license and wish for the best. There are things that we need you to do to actively participate in the program. You need to agree to that as part of the program. Some of those things are like active check-ins. We host check-ins every few weeks. That's where we're able to do our news announcements and updates. That's where we're able to issue prompt challenges, share success stories, interview people, have someone do connect to purpose where they explain what they're doing with Copilot and what the benefits are. That helps to grow buy-in in the program and user adoption overall. We're also doing workshops, and those are kind of like hackathons, focus groups, and roundtable sessions. The purpose of that is to take a subset of the larger community and focus it down to a few people in the community, 15, 20, 30 people that have a shared experience. Maybe they're working with Copilot in Excel. Maybe they're working with just Copilot, and to be able to share what they've done with it so that we can learn how they're implementing it in business processes and determine if those business processes that they're working with can scale to other business units in the organization. That helps us to define our return on the investment, the ROI. And so through those small workshops, we're able to determine within some quantitative value the time and effort that Copilot is saving for certain processes in relation to the expense related to the license that we have. Those focus groups and those roundtables also help to show other people the capabilities, and then we can turn those into success stories and interviews and share those through our check-ins. And we're also doing things like polling and surveys along the way. In addition to looking at the Microsoft content for in the reporting center or in the admin center for reporting about engagement and trends with Copilot. And the combination of these things help us to determine if it's something that we could potentially scale and expand to other parts of the organization in the future. And it's really valuable information, especially when you get into the smaller focus groups and those workshops where people really open up because it's a smaller group. And then we can take that information and broadcast it to the much larger community, and we can really amplify our user adoption program with that. Now, as we transition into navigating with turbulence, there are going to be challenges that you have to overcome as part of this. There's going to be technical challenges. There's going to be in-user application challenges. The fact that we're on an airplane that's being built while we're in the air and updates are coming in real time, that's a challenge. And change management is also going to be a challenge. And one of the biggest pushbacks that you're going to get is from users, will AI replace me and my job? And the thing that I want to emphasize as we go into navigating turbulence is it's called Copilot, not autopilot. It's called Copilot because it sits beside you and it amplifies your ability as a teammate, as a business user, as an information worker to be productive within your organization. And that's really key. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the challenges that you might run into.
Yeah, so it's important to recognize whenever you launch people, like tell them what to expect. And this is something that both of us have seen, is that the hype kind of outruns the reality when it comes to Copilot and most things in general, in that you're going to find that your users, they get very excited right off the bat, and then they go through about a 4-week trough of disillusionment, if you will, where they run into the limits, they find out some of the maturity stuff with Copilot, and we've got to get them on this slope of enlightenment to get out of that and get to their reality where they're better than they were before. They know how to use Copilot in the proper ways. And that takes about a month. And it really takes a community effort to kind of carry those people through that canyon at the bottom. Now, some of the barriers and technical hurdles that we'll run into, Andy will cover that people might run into that take them into that trough.
Yeah, so technical hurdles, technical challenges you're going to find. Office update's going to be core. Depending on whether you're on a semi-annual release, you're on a monthly current release, whether you're on a preview release, that's going to be really, really important. Making sure that users are updated to a current version of Office and that they're receiving regular updates. That being said, that applies to the desktop. Office in the web and Copilot in those Office in the web apps should be up to date through the web browser for those users. Also, something to keep in mind, there's some Copilot experiences that are going to be desktop only, OneNote, for instance, and other Copilot experiences, Outlook for the web, OA, and Outlook for the desktop. You might have desktop classic and desktop new. You might run into technical issues there. For example, there's the features that are supported in Outlook desktop classic are not fully capable in Outlook desktop new. So you have to pick and choose an adventure there. Maybe users just use Copilot in Outlook for the web, and then they use classic Outlook for their daily business activities. You also have the limitations of what operating system are people on. Are they on Windows 10, Windows 11, or are they on Mac? And that needs to factor into some of your troubleshooting, especially as you're getting going early on in the program. Product maturity is also going to be part of this. For example, if you look at OneNote, we have 3 different OneNote experiences: OneNote Web, OneNote Desktop, OneNote for Windows 10, and the version that people are coming from may not be the one that may not be the one where Copilot's supported. So the product maturity and the user's familiarity with that's definitely going to be big. And then just working with Copilot. There are over 125 different Copilots in the Microsoft ecosystem. Everything's named Copilot. So somebody might go into Outlook expecting to be able to summarize multiple email threads versus they need to do that in the Copilot chat app, also known as M365 chat. And that's also been rebranded. And so there's some confusion. Which Copilot do I use and when? And then you've also got to think about some of these experiences happen in the desktop. Some are going to be better in the web, but they also extend to mobile. And you need to have that as part of your success story in your day in the life. You might wake up in the morning, grab your iPad, go to have coffee, and you can utilize Copilot through those Office apps there. And then you can seamlessly switch to like maybe your desktop and work. But as I mentioned with like the Outlook experience, you might just want to use Outlook in the web for your Copilot experiences while you work with classic Outlook for the day-to-day. And then from there, also keep in mind there are adoption barriers. Things are changing rapidly. And so there's going to be a lot of change fatigue. There's going to be that fear of replacement. This is a complex system, even though it's supposed to make things easier. And so there's some ins and outs to learn, what Copilot to use and when. And people get overwhelmed. And that's what the community is going to be for, to help deal with some of those frustrations, to get users past those frustrations, to keep them on that enthusiastic climb as they're beginning that journey. And John, I'll let you take the last one, the big bullet point down there at the bottom.
Yeah.
Data privacy
and
security.
security. Yeah, that needs to underpin all of this is keeping an eye on the data privacy and security, and make sure that you do these things in a very structured manner. So we're coming up on time. I want to speed through the very end here, that once you have your cruising altitude, it's important to monitor your progress. These are some things that you can measure, some resources that are available to you to make sure that you're having a success with your community. You want to continually improve it and keep your community going, keep it informed, to keep that smooth flight. Basically, you're going to start your community, monitor it, see how it's going, and then learn from that, make changes, and iterate through. And then we'll land this thing with thanking you for your help, giving you a couple of actions that I hope inspire you to build your Copilot community from a blueprint. Some things that you can take away from the Microsoft Adoption Center. There's lots of information you can use there. And then please give us feedback about our session, and you'll see the recording on YouTube soon, and we'll make the slide deck available too.
So folks, thank you for taking this journey with us, Flight 365 to Teams Nation. We'll see you on YouTube. You can also check us out at 365 Deep Dive. But this is the conclusion of our flight. So make sure those tray tables are in their upright and locked position. Flight attendants will be coming around for surveys in just a bit. And with that, folks, thank you. We'll see you as you embark to your final destination.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andy and John.
Yeah.
Good one, guys. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks so
and
much.
I saw a couple questions in the chat. I think I got all those answered. If you don't have any, then or if you got some more, then I'll answer those in the chat too. So thank you all.